Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Caines, and Ed Mann.
Hello everyone and welcome to another fine episode of Three Devs and a Maybe. Today it is just me and the Ed Man.
The Ed Man.
The Ed Man. Yeah, how you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. We finally got there. It's been, what is it? So we've had one failed recording, my bad.
Yeah.
And then we've had about a half-hour experience trying to juggle between Google Chrome and Firefox.
It felt like...
and actually two different, an iMac and a MacBook. But we were there, and we've got Zencastr working.
Yep.
So yeah, we should see how this goes.
Yes.
It's really interesting, actually. I mean, this product, so we're trying out Zencastr, which is this online podcasting tool. And it seems to do everything you want. It's almost too good to be true, it's going to be, it seems, because it does VoIP in the browser. You just send someone a link and then they can go there and it records. You can do like the double enders where, you record at your end, they're recording at their end locally, and then it just, automatically post-production merges them together, etc. So we shall see. This will be our first attempt at trying to use it, for one of our conversations. So let's see how it goes, man.
Yeah, well, we did do another one and then you lost the recording, right? So
I kind of glossed over that because it's a very embarrassing, thing. So, thanks for bringing it up, Mick. Yeah, feel really good.
No problem.
How are you doing, sir?
Stressed a little bit, to be honest.
Oh, man. And this half hour, this last half hour didn't help out with that at all.
Not at all. But no, it's good to be on. It's good to have a little break from the code. So, it's all good. How about you?
I'm really good, yeah. Really, really good. How is the project you're working on going?
It's going all right. We're hopefully nearing completion, but it's just, I think I said to you before, but yeah, I think I, by my own admission, made quite a few bad design choices, if I'm being honest. And like I said, not through laziness, just, I don't know, gift of hindsight. It's kind of made me realise that, I should have done a few things differently. And now I'm trying to really catch up with that and put fixes in place. So yeah, it's getting there, and hopefully it'll go live soon. Then I've got my uni project with a deadline of the 1st of December, which that basically that is pretty gutting because I've not really been able to achieve what I was hoping to achieve. I've got lots of data which I need to start analysing, but I always knew it was going to be hard, if not impossible. So, it's no real surprises, but it's a bit frustrating. And actually, I've spoken to quite a few people who, in their final projects for their masters or their PhDs, they didn't actually achieve what they wanted to. So, it's just one of those. And I think the way that I executed it was reasonable. So I'm hoping I'll still pass, but it's really up to them now. So, yeah.
Well, let's address the first one there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go through these two things. So, firstly, hindsight is always 20/20.
Yeah.
And there is no project, specifically of the size you're doing, that you're going to be like, this is the perfect project, perfect architecture, perfect decisions. Everything I did just, it's almost like I did it already, kind of thing. Because the only time that you're ever going to do something perfect is if you've had the opportunity to work on, to test out ideas, to, do choices, and then eventually you've come up with a solution that's tried and true, and you can just apply that again to a project that is very similar. This, again, was a complete greenfield project that you had no idea about beforehand, and you've had to slowly but surely build up a system. I think, as I said, like there's no bit of code, there's no code base that's perfect, and there's always going to be warts in it and tech debt. And it's about consolidating that and then working on a battle plan to eventually, to tackle that, to chisel away at all these problems, to break up that, X problems and then put them into tasks that you can then do to slowly chisel away at it. It's the same thing as legacy code, really. It's, the similar kind of mindset where you have to, you have to get it live, and you may have made a wrong architectural decision, but at the time you thought that was the best one that you could do. That it was the right way forward, and then you look back and you're like, actually, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And you have to live with it for now, get it deployed, and work on, fixing it afterwards. And I think that is the true kind of testament. I think that's, as developers, we need to be as, I suppose it's is kind of like nothing's perfect, and it's very hard because I know I'm a perfectionist. I know you are.
Yeah.
And I think over years, it's very much, there's so many different factors, and we've spoken about this, off air, the different factors that kind of affect you, constraints that you have. And if you had infinite time on a project, then you could probably then say, all right, scrap it all, let's start again. And that's when products don't get released, and when ideas never come to fruition, and you never get to see the results of it. You need to get an MVP out, and you want to be able to see and test to make sure that's working. And then when the success happens and and people start using it, then you can slowly iron out the problems. And maybe the areas that you feel now that are problems may not be problems. You may have been like, actually, no, I went down the right rabbit hole. Going down there and seeing what was going on.
I think you're definitely right, and I guess that's why a lot of companies, they will kind of like work in a niche industry. If they've made a successful application in one area and they've learned and they've got that expertise, and then why wouldn't you carry on trying to do that? But yeah, and like you say, I mean, I have learned so many things. I could list them off all day, but I mean, certainly one of the things I think, I always try and work towards, the KISS acronym, but sometimes, do you know what? There isn't a simple answer. There really isn't, and it's just a case of dealing with the complexity as best you can. And
the ever-changing complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I think there's just sometimes there's that feeling that you can get to a point where your application feels like it's running away from you, like it's getting out of control a little bit, and that's a horrible feeling. And then you just have to stop and you have to rein it back in. I mean, I think one of my demons from this project, one of the things that I regret, I have fixed today, and I said to you, I was really reluctant to use cron jobs as a way of kind of maintaining state in the database, but it's just, looking at all the options, it just now, I think it was the best way to go, so that's what I've done. But my worry with that kind of thing is if the cron job fails, but it's not a critical thing, and I think, like you say, over time I can put in something so, if something does fail, that another worker will kind of spawn and do that. So, like you say, get the MVP out and then address all those factors later, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, and adding asynchronous tasks into the background and splitting out and starting to think in that way. As these small processes that kind of, are really isolated, and then, they transform the data slowly, like the ETL kind of, extract, transform, and then load model for certain data analytical stuff, but also then just in general processing. It does add some complexity, and the way of thinking changes. But it's very topical to actually talk about that, because that's actually one of the things I'd like to talk about later on.
Yeah.
But then addressing quickly your masters.
Yes.
How many? This is the thing. Like projects like that, and research. The amount of failed attempts or attempts that haven't succeeded in what their goal was, slowly builds up to then eventually, someone cracking it. And unfortunately, it wasn't you who cracked that, or, you kind of, you set out and you had an idea, you had a battle plan. And then what the nice thing is then you're giving that knowledge to other people next time, who want to maybe look into this field, to be able to then say, actually, there's some research here. Oh, all right, they did it that way. Maybe I'll just tweak that and do it another way. I mean, all the inventions and all these, groundbreaking inventions we have in the world, not related to computing, related to anything really, are slow tweaks over what people have done beforehand.
No, you're definitely right, and like I say, when I started the project, I was under no illusions that I probably would fail. In fact, one of my first regrets for the project was the title. I wish I'd had a title was an attempt to do this, whereas I think I put reverse engineering, Google search algorithm or something.
But that sounds
stupid.
So much more badass.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, but also ridiculous. And but yeah, I mean, like I say, I need to look through the data that I've got. But for me, certainly, I think one of the things I've shown, and again, I don't think this will be groundbreaking. I think people already know it. But in fact, I've got articles from people from Google who kind of, back this up. But certainly, I can't remember who it was, but someone quite high up at Google who basically said that their search algorithm doesn't really use machine learning. So all these companies that are trying to crack how Google works, you can't, because they're not using machine learning. They are using, engagement figures, which only Google have, because they're the people who've got tracker code on, pretty much everyone's website these days.
Oh, how genius are they, hey?
Yeah, and you know what? They're right, actually, because, what is more important? I mean, what is the biggest indication that a site has got good content other than how long a person spends on the site?
Yeah, and which areas of the site they spend time on, and I think that has been a testament to like a company like Google, which they make products that then they're able to. That it's not necessarily the product that they want to make. Like they're not looking to make the best analytical product. Really, they're looking for the data at the end result of it. So they're giving you a product to think, oh, it's great, it's free. It's this Google Analytics. We get all these things and stuff. And it's like, well, actually, at the end of the day, they're getting all this information and they're able to use it in their core product, which is search.
Yeah, I think there's like an expression, isn't there? Like, if you get a product for free, you are the product. That's the way it works.
Absolutely, that's great. Yeah, so, that is scary.
Yeah. But no, you're absolutely right. And so yeah, it's been interesting, and I have enjoyed doing the project. And I've got a fancy React app that just has like a spinning circle that does nothing. So what else do you want?
Oh, so you beat yourself up way too much, man. I think it's the trouble of being a perfectionist in an imperfect world.
Yeah, true.
Or it's like purity and functions, isn't it? It's like pure, functional programming, and then you have to do this impure I/O and all this undetermined, unreal, kind of unexpected things will happen, and it's trying to deal with that. And
yeah, that is very, very true. But one thing that kind of like, I guess one open question I have from the whole project really is, if like you look at Bing's results that are pretty much identical to Google's, then you think, how's that come about? That one I don't know, and I can't answer. Something I'll probably look at when I'm writing up my dissertation. But, I mean, they're pretty much identical. So either they've got an algorithm that, is very close to Google's, or maybe they I don't know. Maybe they just
copy it. Yeah. They scrape Google for all of their different queries, and they essentially try and align them up. Wow. I mean, it's unrealistic. Well, it's seemingly unrealistic, but that could be along the lines of what they do. I mean, the trouble is what you were trying to do is very hard. Yeah. But I'm really intrigued to read your dissertation and stuff, and it'd be great for you to when you come on next to when you've done it, we can chat about it.
Just make great kindling, getting a fire going, that kind of thing. So I'll send you a few copies.
You're so mean to yourself. It's I shouldn't laugh because it's
I deserve
no.
Yeah, but anyway, that's me.
Oh dear.
In a nutshell. How about you? What have you been up to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I haven't been doing a huge, just unreeling an MVP, and I haven't been doing any cool master stuff, unfortunately. But what I have been doing is, so at work, released the project that we were doing, so that kind of took up a lot of our time, and we kind of neglected a bit of tech debt over a month or two period. And it was really nice, actually, because we were fortunate enough to be able to say, okay, well, let's spend some time now kind of, looking through the backlog and making sure and kind of, trying to tame the tech debt, that we do have, like every product does have. And what I was looking at is revisiting our login and monitoring systems and infrastructure. Yeah. And kind of along the lines of that as well was dealing with how we do, what you were just talking about, asynchronous commands and stuff. So on the first thing, so looking at logging and stuff. So logging and monitoring obviously is a very important topic, and it's a very important thing to have in an application, especially when you've got a lot of people using it and you need to know when an error occurs, or there could be a potential for an error, or is this working? Is the system up as I expect? And looking at the log severities. And that's an interesting thing. Like with your logging, do you use like the PSR logger interface and like with monolog and things like that?
I don't know. To be honest with you, all I literally do at the moment is I use Laravel's exception handler, and then that just sends it off to Sentry. So
okay, well that probably under the hood will use something like monolog, maybe.
It is actually,
and I definitely say once you start getting more into it, it will be definitely a thing you want to look into.
Yeah.
So the logger interface, it goes around it uses the syslog severity warning levels, or severity message levels, and there's 7 of them. Off the top of my head, so there's debug.
Laravel definitely does use monolog. Yes, and info and all these ones, right?
That's it. Yeah, so it's debug, info, notice, warning, error, and error, alert, and an emergency.
Yeah.
And I hope I haven't forgotten any. But yes, so all these 7 levels have different meanings, and what you'll find is there's no actually tried and true perfect, like even in the logger interface does provide, say, here's an example of, you know, the different times you'd use each one of these severities. They're very important actually, and I think severity warnings, the trouble we had was that when we were using our syslog, and we were just logging out info from a file, so we dumped it into a file and then we would read that in and replay that into logly, and we'd always just have a severity of just info or something, but trying to pick out the good ones, like I want to know what errors have happened, because, or alert, and if an alert happens I want to be known about that and I want it to be pinged off to PagerDuty, etc. So working and tweaking on your severities are very important. And one thing I was able to spend a little bit of time on is kind of within our infrastructure, within our products, or each of our individual APIs and all this and our commands and stuff, be able to work out, and even within the domains within that, such as like payments and things, working out what severities each of these messages should be and getting them in and using logly with alerts and stuff. So I would definitely say spend a lot more, you know, people to invest some time into looking at their log severity warning. So I always say log severity warnings when actually that is one of the actual severities you could be, but log severity messaging and kind of, and I really recommend to do that. I'm going to actually put a blog post out. So I was able to write some documentation in our knowledge base just about kind of how we do it and with some examples. But again, it's so specific to your product, like what you deem to be an info to being like, because one of the things is like debug. So debug is like almost like a trace type of thing. And actually in other levels, like other logging standards, trace is another one, trace up to 0 to 6. They have of all these different things. Like I know in Java they have that for log4j. But so you can have like, you know, debug code which just, you know, kind of shows the flow of the structure of how the application kind of, you know, the execution paths. Info would be like application start and stopping and general kind of flow to see, you know, that the application's working as it should be. And then notice, typically you use that with like kind of interesting things that have occurred. So stuff like, you know, like that is out of the, it's not an error and it's not a warning. It's not like something that's gone wrong. It's just something that was interesting that it actually happened. You know, like maybe a payment was declined or something, but it was a user error, and that'd be a notice to us because we're like, oh, that's interesting. Why was it declined? And if too many of these mount up, maybe it's a problem. You then like things like warnings and stuff like that. Warnings are potentially a problem. So maybe the payment decline one is one where, you know, if it happens a couple of times, that should be escalated to a warning because it's interesting. Why is this person still always having issues? Is it our problem? Is it still their problem? And then errors are things that need to be addressed by the user, by admin and things like that. They're, you know, problems that won't kill the system, but may like affect, say, that payment in particular. May need some manual kind of input now. We may have to deal with it manually. And then you'll go into things such as like the the alerts, and the alerts are ones where it's like, look, something bad has happened. We need to address this ASAP. And then you get emergency, and emergency is always the funny one, really, because it's kind of, you never use it because it's this, the system is not working at all. And to be able to send that, the system's not working at all, it's kind of a weird one. But because the syslog standard is used for such a generic amount of things, kind of many different things, then it's trying to cater for a lot of different audiences.
So I'm guessing you get a bit annoyed when people use the wrong kind of levels, like unnecessarily.
Well, I used to be that guy. Like I used to just use info and debug for everything. Yeah. And I would use them, you know, kind of intermittently, and then I may mix up and be like, oh, this one I'm going to use a notice for. But I would have no reason to be using it other than it's what I felt it was. And going in and reading and being like, why are these logging levels like this? And looking at it, that was me doing that. I'm like, well, why have I done that? And I think it's been able to take that step back and look at these logging severities, because it's so important when you started tracing through things, being able to, especially in like a syslog format where you send stuff through using syslog, you know, you're able to get the severity, and you're able to get like the PID, so the process ID, and you're able to get the application specific, and then you're able to get the message, and it gives you all this kind of information around, is this important enough for me to have to deal with now, soon, you know, kind of within the next, you know, X amount of days or whatever, you know, it kind of prioritizes what something happened and when has occurred. And maybe if a batch of these happen in a certain space of time, you need to deal with it in a certain case. You know, it adds on, and it's the next level from, you know, like just sending out emails to like a certain inbox or, you know, these kind of thing.
One thing I find, and I've not had this for a long time, but like definitely recently with like my final project not working out how I wanted it to, and issues with this project I'm working on is, you know, I've definitely had a bit of imposter syndrome recently. And, but one thing I find, like using Sentry, which is brilliant, don't get me wrong, absolutely superb. You know, when you're getting pinged with emails with stuff going wrong, the stress can really build up. And ultimately, it's good to have because you fix the errors and then you can go through, tick them all off and you feel good. But you have to be careful, I think. Sometimes it's interesting how we perceive error logs, I guess.
I think that is the hose pipe problem, isn't it? And it's the, like you're essentially now, what you'll find is that a lot of problems that you used to have that, would just user error, like the amount of people that an actual audience will come and email you say that there was a problem. These are like the most severe ones because they're affecting them there and then, and they want to still use the products and they still want to, they're just annoyed that, look, this needs to be fixed, etc.
Yeah.
Maybe they're paying for the product or maybe they just want to use it. They've got a vested interest in letting you know about it.
Yeah.
Some people don't even bother and it may break on them and they'll be like, oh, whatever, I'll try again, do something else. And it will just work and then you'll never know about it. And unless you log that and actually, you kind of curate, this information, you'll never know about some of these problems. And that may be the reason why, when you start opening up that hose pipe and you open up the hose pipe and you're like, whoa, there's so many problems. It's because they've pre-mounted over time and you haven't had a chance to fix them because you've never actually had a port of call to actually view them.
Yeah, true.
But I would say though, like, definitely, I think false positives are one of those horrible things as well. Like, particularly, like we have like certain race conditions in our system that slowly and surely we're trying to fix, but they're very hard to fix in some nitty gritty areas.
Yeah.
And they're hitting kind of like database, kind of constraints and stuff that we don't want them to. We want them to be handled above that layer. I mean, fortunately, obviously the database invariance is protecting us, but we obviously want to be protecting. Like it should never get to that layer, but you have to kind of not. It's like the testing issue as well, like with the red. If you see a lot of red and you're used to seeing red, you kind of don't care. So this is again where severities come in really, really quite prominently, because if I see an alert, I know that's something we have to deal with ASAP. That's something you should wake up in the, in the morning, early in the morning, because it's happening. If you're seeing errors and things, you're like, okay, well, these things I need to address. And warnings and things, it's like, oh, that's interesting. There's quite a few warnings going on there. Maybe I need to investigate that at some point today. But they do allow you to prioritize things. Because if you're just getting, as you say, like a hose pipe full of errors or whatever you deem, information that, could be, how do you prioritize that? And how do you deem like this is necessary? Because, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, well, I think, on the priority thing, that one of the great things about Sentry is you can see those counts. So you know what your kind of big errors are, and you then do have somewhere to start. But I think when you're up against it, those kind of things can get really quite stressful.
But it is good, though, to have this information. I do think more information or more data that can be converted into information is more valuable.
It's better than having your head buried in the sand, right?
I think, and I think then it is just all about filtering it out and working, about like, you want to know when things are going wrong. I would prefer to know before the user tells me that something's gone wrong. Yeah. I can see their request immediately come in, right, there was a problem there, let me try and rectify it before they come along, in an asynchronous way, like maybe an hour later saying, oh, there was a problem with this, etc. So I think it is better. And actually then again, like, so talking about the asynchronous stuff, so you're saying that you started, you've started off doing a couple of cron jobs and stuff in your current project.
Yeah.
Did you mind like talking about like why? What was the kind of the reasoning?
Yeah, so the system I'm building obviously is all to do with statistics, but there are some that are really hard to mine and get. So like I think I was saying to you, like I thought I did everything with the best kind of what am I thinking of it? Kind of database design in mind. So sort of had like one item.
Normalization,
exactly,
third normal form.
Yeah, exactly, and just getting all the relationships right and stuff. But because of the way I did that, that meant then retrieving some data was really, really hard, and there was a lot of like nested data. So the way that I could get around with that was using a cron job basically to then just kind of, go around and say, look, is this finished with? Okay, now update this. And I know it's a system that's used a lot. I mean, I think Magento does it, right? And a lot of systems do it for like building flat tables. You do that, right? Am I right in thinking you create flat tables with crons or something?
Yeah, you process things using, because there's two different ways, isn't there? You can have processes that require, asynchronous background stuff, and then you would have, the flat table approach.
Yeah.
Where, you've got a bit of data, but you want to do like an ETL kind of, I want to break this up. I know I've got to query this type of information and aggregate it.
Yeah. So mine is just, going through and, and synchronizing data, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I wanted to avoid it, to be honest. I've been resisting it for a long time, but it just got to the point where the resistance was stupid, the reasons I was resisting it. So, but I guess my real objection to it is, and it kind of ties in, it's not technical debt, but in my mind, I always think like, what happens if I do get hit by a boss and someone else comes in to work on this application? Looking for cron jobs might not be the first thing they would look at. And then they, if you're not careful, they just seem like this voodoo magic that's doing things to your system and you've no idea what or why or when. And like, where do you document that? Or I don't know, maybe the first person to come in will be like, oh yeah, cron tab E, let's have a look what's going on. But I don't know. I mean...
Well, no, it is interesting actually, because I suppose it does add and increase the complexity of the application, because now there's not this single, flow through the application to do a request. It may be relying upon things that have occurred beforehand.
Yeah.
But yeah, once a system, and it's actually interesting. So this is a blog post that I'm writing for work about the other thing we've done. So we did the log severity stuff, and then it was kind of looking into the way that we do our commands. So we have a lot. We have a lot of asynchronous background stuff that needs to go on within the application. Whether it be sending emails or processing queues or doing one-offs things. Like every day we kind of send off emails to certain people, analytical stuff, blah blah blah, whatever. And we typically we use Symfony, so we're using the command kind of system set up in there, and it works really well. And we initially started off, so we would have that, and we'd have a cron tab, and we'd do a cron, and say like every 5 minutes we'd do this task or something, and that would work fine. And over time it gets to a point where you've got too much throughput now, where it's like let's use the analogy of an email system. So say you start off with a new system, so maybe your system then, right? So you start off and you're saying, okay, then I would like to send out queued emails every 30 minutes. Because, it's okay for these people just to batch up the emails and send them out every 30 minutes. So you have a cron job, which just literally is just a cron tab saying, all right, every 30 minutes, run this command.
Yeah.
And it will send out all those emails, or the batched up emails that have occurred within that 30 minutes. Seems pretty realistic. That's now an asynchronous task. All you do now is each request now, you're just saying, yeah, fine, whatever. They're registering. I mean, maybe 30 minutes is too little time. Maybe say every 5 minutes or something. And you're saying, okay, then add it to the queue for sending emails now. Fine. So you've gone from maybe a single request, which sent out the email with it, to now an asynchronous one where you've got added a queue. So that has added the complexity, but it now allows you to kind of deal with those two problems separately.
Yeah.
Also another thing is dealing with kind of the separation. And like you say, so the bus factor. So I look at your code base and I have this command called send queued emails.
Yeah.
And then you think, what the hell does that, who runs that? What, this guy run it whenever he wants to?
Yeah.
It's like, there's nothing in there. I mean, you could have have a comment on it saying, by the way, this is a cron, in cron tab, you should do this, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
One thing at MyBuilder, what they did before I got there, and it's a really good tool, is they created a cron package which generated cron tabs with like a nice DSL in PHP.
Okay.
But also they made the Chronos bundle in Symfony, and what that allows you to do is allows you to put PHP annotations at the top of your command classes. So what you could do is I have a command, send queued jobs, or send queued emails, sorry, and it says @cron, and you specify the cron annotation you want, and then the server it's on. So you now know when I look in there, and this helps me so much, and it has helped all developers, I think, when they've been introduced to it, to be able to see it's very close to the code that's being run. So you can see, right, yeah, so this is getting run every 5 minutes then. Now that makes sense, okay. And, that kind of, it provides you without having to write extra documentation. It's part of the code. The code then, I mean, I know obviously dot comments being code, it's a controversial thing, but it allows you to be like, okay, then that information about when it gets run is very close to where the actual code that is being run is.
Yeah.
So that kind of helps address that issue.
Yeah.
And that was great. So, we've done that, and we kind of you get to a point there, though, where 5 minute intervals isn't good enough, and you've gone down to maybe a 1 minute interval, and it still isn't good enough. And what you really want to do is you want to make this continuous. So you're not saying it's time dependent anymore. It's not saying every 30 minutes I want to do this, or every 1 minute. And you're not saying I only want to do this, on a Tuesday at 1 o'clock or something. You're saying, I would like this to run forever. As long as I can, please, I want it to be while true, essentially. Pick out an email and send it immediately.
Okay.
To kind of give you that, the effect, when the request comes in, it's instantaneous to the user. Okay, so, and your throughput really warrants that now. Now, what we did was we kind of just slowly iterated on our solution. So what we decided was we're like, okay, then, well, let's add this concept of a run manager. So what you do, instead of sending, having like a method where you'll be like, get me all the unprocessed emails and then send those, that have occurred in the minute interval or the 5-minute interval you had.
Yeah.
What you do instead is you just have a while and the run manager is okay. So you'll say, okay, well, I can still run, pick out an email, send it, boom.
Genius.
Now, this could be an infinite, loop, isn't it, essentially? Because you could just be like, all right, start the command and keep going.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of factors in there, because so you'd start off, but then obviously the real world, again, you can't run things forever, unfortunately. You couldn't, we were speaking to, Joe in a previous episode, garbage collection is very important and things. And yeah, you can write things run for a long, long time, but sometimes you get yourself in a state where the best thing to do is turn it off and on again, essentially, and just restart that process. Whether it's, it's allocated too much memory or the duration, you're like, I can't have this connection open for that long, etc.
Yeah.
So you couldn't just go with the fact of saying, all right, I'd like to start this command and it run forever, and it's just happening in the background. You can top it and see that it's running. So what we ended up doing as well, along with the run manager, was we would allocate and say, okay, well, there's max run time. So, this command can only run 30 minutes. So run this command for 30 minutes. And we'd have the cron declaration, and the cron declaration would say, I want to run this for every 30 minutes, but there's a maximum of 2 of these can be running at a certain time. So, to a certain time, 2 of these can be running, and each of them can last for 30 minutes. And then we'd say, in the cron annotation would say, check this is true every minute. So what would happen then is, every minute the cron would run and it would say, oh, have you got 2 of you running? If not, I can start. Oh, you've got 2 running. All right, sorry. Another one, oh, have you got 2 running? This kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that worked really well. And it worked really well for a long time for us, because it was still using that system we had, and it was a slow iteration on it, kind of iterating on what we already had. And we was, it was allowing us then to have these continuously running processes. And that is, a good place that you can be at, where you can have these continuous processes and you can have, your time dependent ones, and they can kind of be interleaved. But the trouble is there's a couple of problems with that. And one is that, say if one of them unexpectedly dies. So I say it dies, like halfway through, it doesn't do the 30 minutes and it's died. And now it's got a whole minute until that one will spawn up again, because it's a minute until the cron checks.
Yeah.
And also another thing with that is that the cron checking every minute, it has to load up that command just for it to kill it again, most likely, because 2 will already be running.
Yeah.
And that can be a bit of a bit performance intensive. And also another thing is it's gone into this whole idea that, again, the bus factor for you maybe, where you're like, well, what's actually happening here? It's really confusing, because it's like you've got this 2, you're saying run every minute, but then you've got this while. Like you have to explicitly kind of write to say, in the command to say, look, okay, what's really happening here is we want 2 of these running, but they may not both be running. We're checking every minute to see if they're running. If one of them can start running, then they do. And it's just, it gets... you have to differentiate between a continuous process and a time-dependent one. And that was one of the things then that I started working on. So, I mean, kind of, so that's kind of the first part of the story.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting, like, kind of your feelings towards that. Like, how do you feel about maybe an approach like that, where you would use cron and you'd have a run manager kind of feel?
Well, I mean, at the moment, I'm using Laravel's cron scheduler. So, like you say, there is then that connection to the code again, and you can see it. It's very easy to find. So, but yeah, some of the ideas you were talking about there, like certainly with like a continuous process. But yeah, I'd be scared of things timing out or, draining memory leaks, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it sounds quite interesting way of doing things, to be honest.
So yeah, I mean, that was kind of where we were at from a couple of weeks ago, and one thing you do then have to bear in mind very much is, logging is important, because you need to know if these processes are running and how are they running, and are there enough of them running, and you deal with, like, the way you deal with it. What we do is with Datadog, we have queues, queue databases, essentially systems, where you slowly pick off from the top, like what I need to be able to do, what needs to be processed. Sorry. And yeah, so then you'd have like how long, what is the oldest item that hasn't been processed on this queue? And that would allow you to see how long, what the health is. Oh, hang on a minute, this is taking a little longer. Maybe we need to add another process in or something like that, to be doing more output or more throughput, sorry. And that worked fine. But to differentiate between a time-based task and a continuous task, I think is the key there. And your way of thinking about them is subtly different, because when a time-based task, time dependent, I want this to run every hour because every hour I want to just send out our welcome emails or something, or I want to send out our survey emails or whatever, surveys, or I don't know, do some kind of task. But when you're dealing with queues and you're dealing with continuous stuff, it's like, I want to process this as soon as possible. I don't actually want it to be time dependent. I just want it to happen.
Yeah.
When something comes in, I want it to be as soon as possible. So you are looking at this forever kind of, I want it to be running forever, really. Ideally, like the wild true would be great.
Yeah.
And obviously the factors of real life kind of come in where it's like, well, it can't actually run forever. And that's when you get into things using stuff like Supervisor D. And that is a process control manager written in Python that essentially what you do is it allows you to, it spawns child processes or your code essentially from it. And then like when a sig child, which is then that it's finished or it's exited for some reason has occurred, Supervisor knows about it and can say, okay, then let's start up a new one. So essentially what it allows you to do is say, I want one of these running all the time, or I want two of these running all the time. And when they die, it will just start up a new one for you. And and it becomes, let it die kind of thing is allowed. And it's that whole Erlang thing very much so where, you're thinking like, okay, it's fine if it dies because we'll start a new one up.
Yeah.
And you never have to worry then about, it's a completely different way of thinking.
Is it hard to implement if you've not used it before?
Not really. It's very similar to cron in that, what you're doing is specifying what you need to run, and it's, config and everything. And then you're just saying, oh, I want two of these running, please. Or I want one of these running all the time. And you can use the status there. And Datadog integration is very well kind of kept because you're able then to check and analyze the health and make sure that none of these are critical. It has kind of checks to make sure that processes don't time out, unexpectedly. So, what will happen is you'll say, look, for it to be a successful start of that process, it needs to be up for at least a second because maybe you'll have something in there that quickly kills it or something. And it abides by the status codes and stuff to what it's returned. Oh, there was an error, it's critical, etc. You need to address this. What we actually did as well was we also made, so that was one thing I made, I open sourced a couple of weeks ago, which was the Supervisor bundle, which pretty much is a clone of the Kronos bundle, where it allows you to take, again, use an annotation, and you say, I want Supervisor, how many processes do you want? I want one of these. And so it allows you then to use a command within, when you do your deployment, what it does is you're able to dump you can dump the Kronos. So that's how it works, is that there's a command that scans all your commands for you and says, all right, these are the commands, and it generates the Kronos tab for you. And then there's one that does it for the Supervisor, and it will generate the config for you. And then you can just load those in to, your deployment when you're deploying it, and it'll be like, yep, these are all the current things that are running.
That sounds quite nice. I'll have to check that out.
And it works quite well. But then there is a final part to this, of this long story, and I'm really sorry I keep rambling on. But so the final part, though, is dealing with killing them or stopping them. So, again, when you're dealing now with your processes, so if I was to, your process now that you have, if I was to kill it halfway through, would there be an issue?
There wouldn't be an issue, but I wouldn't have a clue it had died, other than, looking at a database and thinking, hang on, what's going on here? But no, it wouldn't cause any huge issues.
So there's no like kind of partial completed process. So if I was to say, like, say it was forever running, but I then, for a deployment, I needed to restart that process, would I have to wait for the currently running process to finish before I could start a new one, or could I just kill that one and start a new one and it would all be fine? Like, is there kind of interleaved kind of, not, the trouble is like non-transactional stuff that really should be transactional?
I was going to say, I mean, all it's really doing is executing a query. So I guess once you've executed that query, it's going to run. Yeah, I honestly don't know what would happen.
No, I think that's fine actually. So I think what you've got, because you've got the auto transaction stuff in there, really.
Yeah.
I think with that, if you're dealing with multiple queries and you don't begin a transaction and it's not database dependent, maybe it is the fact that it's dealing with a third party and you like saying sending an email. Well, I pluck the email out. I need to fetch something from one API, fetch something from another, and then do something else. Yeah. If I kill it halfway through, one of these things is going to be like, well, hang on, what happened to this thing? I assume it was sent then because I haven't heard any other reason why not or something. Yeah. And we got into this whole idea of soft killing. So. And then I said, again, speaking to Joe last episode, or probably a couple of episodes ago, the idea that you can tell the process, hang on a minute, sig term, by the way, can you just terminate, please? Safely terminate and close down because I want to start a new one maybe, or I just want you to die. Sig 9, or sig kill, kill 9, which is what you typically do when you just want to kill something. Because it's like, you want to just completely, that is like the be all and end all. Yeah. There's no going back for this process. It can't clean up itself. It's gone. You don't really want to do that. You ideally want to give it a little grace period. So that's what we do with our deployments and stuff. So one of the other problems we had with the deployments was there was a time in a window when we do a deploy that we would have maybe an old version of a process running and a new process running because, maybe that command had just started up and now it's got a 15-minute window to be around before, it'll start up and give our new code. So we had to always cater for all that. Now, what we've done instead now is using Supervisor with these forever tasks is to be like, you can do a H up on it, a sig up, sorry. So you can say, Supervisor, reload your config, which we've just dumped using Supervisor, the bundle, sorry. And also try and terminate all your terminate all your processes. So sig terminate them, give them a little bit of time. We then have this process within each of the processes to check to say, are you trying to do a soft kill? If you want to do a soft kill at these points, these are good break points for you to stop. You're allowed to stop. So they're very specific to the application, to that command code. And then you can stop, and that's great, And it also means then that safely that process has happened. Maybe it's completing up to that, it's like, all right, I will stop, but once I've sent off this queued email, and then, I'm able to safely stop. And it gives that each command a safe, a kind of a nudge to say, we need you to stop. We'll give you a little while. And if you stop within that time, you're great. Obviously, if they don't stop, we eventually will have to sig kill you. But, what we do is we give a grace period about 30 seconds. We're saying, look, you have that much time to all stop. And once you've stopped, and then what we do is we do an update, and then we reload and we restart. And the nice thing about that is the deployment then is essentially, yep, I want everything to stop safely, and I want everything to start with a brand new code. And it's working really well, and we're really enjoying and reaping the rewards for that.
Nice. Sounds good.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. It's a kind of sorry, I've kind of just spewed off a lot of stuff there, but I really was like it was interesting when you mentioned that you were doing some of this stuff now, and I really recommend like looking into Supervisor D. But it is that gradual progression. Over time, your solution will change based on your throughput, based on your needs.
Is that
and at the moment, a cron tab works fine. Like a simple cron job just will work fine.
I feel like I've heard of Supervisor. Is that something that ships with most Linux distros, or it's something you have to install? Or
so some things use it. So you have systemd.
Okay.
But that's not the same, really. This is it's very similar. Like it wants to keep things running, but it's more of like an application level one where it's dealing with things that you want, like business logic that you want. Like I want this command always running, as opposed to I want this service on the system actually running.
Right.
But some things do use it. Like Datadog, their agent uses it. So they use their own Supervisor instance just so they can make sure that keeps running. Because things can happen, things can die, and things do stop, and you have to assert and make sure. And that's when the beauty of like the Unix signaling comes in, because it will let it know immediately, and then it will decide what to do next.
Yeah. No, you're right. That was the thing I took away from that microservices book, was that you should plan for things dying. You shouldn't just hope that doesn't happen.
The Erlang philosophy of let it die. You have to you can't assume that things are it's not a pure world. And I think it's not a pure world, man. It's not a nice world. Things are going to unexpectedly happen.
Yeah.
And dealing with that and dealing with failure is the key, because it allows you then to your system. It's that whole. That was one actually thing you were talking about in the lost episode, as we'll call it. Is the Netflix Chaos Monkey.
Yeah. I think they had a few, didn't they? It was Chaos Monkey, and there was like Chaos Gorilla or something. It was even worse. Or
oh god, I love that. It's like we didn't get hit by a monkey, we got hit by a gorilla.
Or they just kill off like live systems or something. It was insane. But yeah, great idea, really. I guess if it helps you, be ready for that eventuality.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, have you got any other things? I mean, we're hitting the 45-minute mark.
Got a question. I think I've probably asked you this 3 million times before, but I'm going to hit you with it. Best tool for testing your JavaScript applications in terms of like behavior. Like, I mean, I've used what's the famous one that you can like set up in Firefox and get running and stuff?
Selenium.
Yeah, I've used that before. But I'm guessing that was years ago. What's like the best?
No, absolutely. I mean, Selenium's still used. It depends on what you're doing. Like, it is obviously all broken up, with what you need to do. Like, if I'm clicking on that button, then are you testing to make sure that I assert that the button action is called, or are you testing to make sure that the actions that occur within that button are then shown back up the screen, etc.? Like, how much is it a functional test as opposed to more of an isolated unit?
Well, the thing is, like, this application is predominantly JavaScript, I say. It's like the biggest JavaScript application I've built. So I feel like I need to cover all bases with it, to be honest with you. I mean,
so I would say you have to split. You want, obviously, it's that whole cone thing where you want as many unit tests as possible.
Yeah.
They should be, you'll be on end all, where you're in isolation testing all these different processes that occur, different actions within, behavioral, kind of a unit of code. Like, again, a unit is not just a class. It's like, it can be a collection of classes that build up a bit of functionality in your site or within, your application. So you'd go through that, and then you slowly build up to more of the functional stuff where then it's like testing, contractual testing, I like to think of it, where, you're making sure that it is doing the API calls and that you're getting, you're sending off the correct data for those kind of things. And it's very tough to say that there's no one-stop shop, I would say, for it. Definitely one thing that we have been looking at, that you can look into Jest and things if you want to look in React, the React world kind of thing. Okay. And then there's also things like the Phantom JS, where you want to load up a full DOM and then start manipulating it and assert that, when I'm loading this up in this React, when I'm loading this React component up, assert this state with this state, assert that this is occurring and things.
See, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm looking for something in between, like, not testing and, like, very basic testing. I need something that I can do quick, because time is really short. So is there anything that's, like, really quite...
I would say then, like, so if you haven't done any... If you're very much like, I need to start this off, I would say get Phantom going.
Okay.
And assert the outer layer.
Okay.
Do some functional tests, because at least you've got some test coverage then.
Yeah.
And you can assert common, paths, whether it's the happy cases or you're dealing with some of the cases. But then you want to then start looking into the actual core domain logic and working out, okay, can I break this up and work and testing these individual units?
Cool.
So I'd say work on Phantom JS first then, and then go in.
Outsourcing. I heard you loud and clear.
I knew you'd bring that up in this project, in this podcast. Again, part of the lost episodes podcast. Oh, the audience will be reaping to, be missed out on that.
That was the best episode we've ever recorded, wasn't it?
Ever done.
And lots
Absolutely.
of celebrity cameos on that episode. Shame. Real shame.
It is a real shame. Oh, dear. Well, I would say that's been a great episode. That's, again, my humble opinion. And yeah, I think we're ready to wrap up. But I do think now, and touch wood in my head, and also while I just have a quick sip of coffee. 1 second. Sorry, that's a plug there for coffee. What is this? This is Kenko Dark Roast.
And do you get commission for every cup that's sold, or?
Well, no, I thought, I started off. Do you remember that chili Coke that I pimped once?
Yes.
Well, they never got back to me, but I'm hoping that Kenko Dark Roast, intense and smoky, 5%, 5 strength. These are the coffee beans. So I bought a coffee machine.
Free dev Kenko, and you get 10% off. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There we go. I like your thinking.
Yeah.
I'm a big, coffee Kenko connoisseur. So wait to see what is on the next episode. Who knows? Which famous brand of coffee will we have there? Anyway, no. So, I think it's been a great episode. And I think, we'll hopefully, again, touch wood, we'll actually be around more often. Now we've got Zencastr set up and we can hopefully ship these.
Yes.
Just ship it, I say. Is our exactly,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right then, cool. Dave. Well, it's been great speaking to you. And I'll speak to you again next week.
Speak to you then. Cheers.
Goodbye.
Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamamaybe.com. Or follow us on Twitter at the number 3 devs and a maybe.